Hey there, it's Monday. Welcome to another weekly vlog. I'm going to start with the usual weekly reading plans. The week itself is not chilled, but my reading plans are therefore quite chilled. I feel like I've been doing absolutely loads of reading lately, and I can kind of feel a little bit of a reading slump coming on. Not a reading slump exactly, just reading exhaustion. I don't know if you get that when you feel like you've been reading so much that you kind of want a bit of a break, and life is coming along at a good time because I'm now launching into quite a few weeks of really intensive activity and visiting people and lots of things to do, so I won't have as much time for reading, so I'm just going to set myself much smaller goals. So this week, Monday, Tuesday, we are in the last 2 days of our quarantine, and then Wednesday we are out of quarantine, and it's like all systems go from Wednesday onwards. So on Wednesday we have a really exciting day planned. We are going to go and view what will probably be our venue for our wedding, so I will bring you along on that to have a look around. I'm really excited about it. I actually know the location. It's like somewhere that I went to a lot when I grew up, but Tom's going to be seeing it for the first time, so I'm really hopeful that he likes it. Then on Thursday we are travelling to Tom's hometown because on Saturday his brother is getting married, and so obviously Thursday, Friday is going to be joining in with wedding prep, and then Saturday it's going to be the actual wedding. I don't think I'm going to vlog much of that for this because, you know, it's loads and loads of people who probably don't want to be on YouTube. But Tom's brother and I have got a plan to make a video for the bride and groom of the wedding, and he's going to do a load of interviews with people who are going to the wedding, and I'm going to use my new camera that I got last week to hopefully film some nice clips of the wedding as it happens, because they've not got a videographer, and then we're going to work together to try and make a nice video of the wedding. So that's going to be really lovely. And then Sunday, I imagine, will just be lots of mingling with Tom's family and that kind of thing. Tom's got a very big family and they're all absolutely lovely. It's going to be so nice to spend some time with them. So yeah, that's the plan for this week. Then reading wise, I'm going to be listening to a book called Wildflower Girl by Marita, Conlon, McKenna. This is the second book in the Children of the Famine trilogy. I listened to the first one on the plane on the way back from Congo, and I really enjoyed it. That was about 3 children who walk across Ireland looking for a relative when the famine hits and they lose both of their parents. This second book is about one of the children emigrating to America, so it's a very different storyline. I'm excited for it. I thought the first one was really nicely written, really well told, really engaging and interesting, so I'm looking forward to that. It's a middle grade book, so that should be a nice quick listen. And then in terms of reading, I'm reading on my Kindle at the moment. I've decided to focus on getting through a few of my Kindle books again. I've been loving reading hard copy books. It's definitely my preferred way of reading, but as I'm about to launch into a few weeks of doing a lot of travelling, thought it would be better to refocus on the Kindle. So I've got a book on the Kindle which is called Books Promiscuously Read, Reading as a Way of Life. It's quite a short-ish text. It's kind of a manifesto on why you should read, which I know is 100% preaching to the choir. Obviously reading is a way of life for me, and it's probably a way of life for most of the people who watch this channel, but I still find the topic of why read just a really fascinating one. I feel like people have surprisingly different responses to the question of why do you read. You know, obviously a lot of people are like, oh well, partly for entertainment, but some people it's a lot more that they're reading because they're seeking knowledge. For other people they're purely seeking escapism. I know for myself, one of the things that I personally get out of reading is that kind of moral boost of seeing impressive role models or just looking at the way that other people live their lives, and that bringing me to reflect on how I live my life. I've actually read a couple of pages of it so far, just read the beginning of it, and it's kind of a little bit different to what I anticipated it was going to be. I thought it might be one of those bookish memoir type things. I feel like Reading as a Way of Life as a subtitle sort of suggests that this could be a story about reading as her way of life and how reading has impacted her, but from the tone of the first few pages it's very clearly not that. It's more of an academic text. So far it seems like one of her main arguments, which is really interesting, is that reading doesn't per se hold inherent value, which is something that I think certainly we readers always argue that it does. And she's more just saying, for some people reading holds no value, but if you are somebody for whom reading holds value, then you should cling to that and you should defend it, and it is your right to live a life spent in books. That's a good way to live a life if that's meaningful and important to you. Those are the 2 books that I'm going to be reading this week. I'm not going to push myself too much to read more stuff, and I will keep you updated as the week goes along. Hopefully it will be a nice fun one with some actual out and about bits rather than just being in quarantine in the house. Hey there, it's Wednesday and I'm just sitting down with yet another cup of tea. You can probably tell by the lipstick all over it. I've had a lot of cups of tea out of this mug so far today. I'm just trying to cheer myself up because today is not going the best, we could say. We were supposed to be out of quarantine today and going to view our probable wedding venue, as I mentioned on Monday, but unfortunately we haven't had our COVID results back yet, which is really annoying because it's supposed to be a 24-hour service and it has definitely not been. I feel like this is the story of my life with COVID. So we haven't been able to leave the house to do that today. We are hopefully going to do it tomorrow morning before we leave, but it is gonna just mean that it turns into a real rush and we have to go with suitcases and it's just not gonna be as nice as I pictured it was going to be in my mind. Also, now Tom's heard back from his COVID test and I haven't, so I might even have to stay here by myself, which would suck. I do have a little reading update because I finished listening to Wildflower Girl by Marita, Conlon, McKenna, and it was really, really good. So it was the second part in the Children of the Famine trilogy, and it told the story of one of the children making the voyage across to emigrate to America and then her time when she arrived there. And what I liked about it was that I just felt like it did a brilliant job of building on the first book, but really not being the same as the first book. So I think 7 years have gone by since the ages that the children were at in the first book, and so they've all grown up and developed. And I think one of my favourite ages of children to read about is when they're in that bracket between, I guess, like teenage years. For historical fiction, I find those teenage years of kind of between 13 and 19 really fascinating, and so much happens in children's lives, particularly in historical fiction. You know, a lot of people get married younger and stuff like that. You often get a really interesting storyline out of those ages, and this was definitely the case with this book. The characters had grown and developed, but stayed pretty true to what they were like when they were younger, when we met them in the first book. And the storyline was just really different, because in the first book there was a clear purpose of, okay, 3 children and they're starving, they need to go and try and find someone to look after them, and they felt very much like children going on that journey. Whereas in this book, the girl who goes over to America is 13, and so she's a lot older, she's a lot more mature, she's kind of walking that cusp of still being a child and being an adult, and it did, again, just like the first one, a really wonderful job of being sensitively written enough that you could totally read this if you were a child, it wouldn't traumatize you, but also getting across all of the hardship and sorrow. I think it did a really wonderful job of, goodness knows what's bothering Oscar next door. It did a really wonderful job of bringing home to me how much that voyage to America meant that you were leaving your family behind and you'll probably never see them again, which is huge and is a concept that is just so hard to imagine in today's world, where you can always take a plane and, you know, you can get all over the world fairly easily. The positions of service that the girl ends up in, and the fact that she's seen as being in a lower social status to the members of the household that she's working as a servant for, that was portrayed really well. The relationships between people, and the fact that although you were able to make friends, everybody was also very much in it for themselves, and unsurprisingly afraid of the consequences of what would happen if they lost their job or if something went wrong, and so people would put up with awful treatment and they didn't necessarily have somewhere to turn to or somewhere to go if things didn't go right. That was all brought across really well, and it was just, again, really lovely writing. I really enjoyed it, and I feel like I learned something, which is kind of exactly what you want out of historical fiction. And I'm so excited to listen to the third book. I think it's called Fields of Home. I'm really sad because I thought that it was on BorrowBox, which is my library app, which is how I've listened to the first 2, but it wasn't, so I'm going to have to wait until I get another Audible credit before I can listen to the story. So I can't immediately follow on to the next one in the series, which is what I was hoping to do. As for the book that I'm reading, Books Promiscuously Read, I have read some more of this. It is quite heavy going and academic, which isn't necessarily the kind of writing that I'm really in the mood for at the moment. There's some interesting arguments in there. One of the ones that I particularly liked is that the author compares reading to play and says that play for children is not the opposite of work, it's the opposite of reality, and reading for adults is the same thing. So when we read, we get to transition to a kind of intermediary world. Language is a fixed medium, but it will be interpreted in different ways depending upon what the reader brings to it. So I thought that was quite an interesting idea. Honestly, I'm finding it the kind of book, you know, where you highlight a lot of quotes, but you don't really know what to do with them. There's quite a lot of lines I'm like, oh, that's clever, highlight that, but I don't necessarily have my own take on it or my own opinion. I sort of need to go back through again with my thinking cap on and decide whether I really agree with what the author's saying and maybe write a list of summary of her key arguments. So it's an interesting text. I feel like there's some interesting ideas in it, but I'm not whizzing through it, and I'm also not sure. So far she's listed about 20 different reasons why to read, and I'm not sure how well they all stand on their own as independent reasons. It kind of takes me back to my university days when I was reading literary criticism. I feel like literary criticisms can so often be padded out by a load of intelligent sounding fluff, and I sort of feel like this book is doing that a bit too, and I need to try and whittle it down and work out what she's actually saying in amongst the cloud of clever sounding sentences that I'm not sure are vastly contributing to the central argument of the text. Listening wise, as I can't listen to the third volume of Children of the Famine, I'm going to go back to The Inimitable Jeeves by Stephen Fry. That is exactly the kind of book that I'm in the mood for, just something completely mindless but charming and nicely written and funny. So I'll be listening to that in the background while I'm going about my daily life. I think that will jolly well cheer me up. I'm halfway through my cup of tea and I'm feeling in such a better mood already. Tea really does cure all ills. Fortunately, we did finally get our test results this morning, and so we've come to look around our wedding venue, which I'm so happy about. We literally brought our suitcases with us. We're going to get the train straight away after. But yeah, hooray!
If I'm gonna love